Next, please.
Costa Giacomis from the University of New York in Tirana. We have recently observed a disconcerting escalation of tension between France and Turkey on the grounds of what is viewed in France as Armenian genocide at the beginning of the 20th century. Taking into consideration rising rates of xenophobia, in the region around France, to what extent do you think that this might have a spillover effect? That's my first question. And my second question would be, how do you respond to those critics who view American-centric, let's say, views of a non-polar world as some sort of a nervous reaction of America kind of losing, let's say, the dominance over world politics? Thank you.
Right. Let me start with the first question. You may have to remind me about the second one. There's two. They're not very related questions. I don't think that the French-Turkish dispute, even if it is a dispute over this Armenian genocide question, I don't think it will escalate. We're not talking about two major powers that are in different blocks and can mobilize against each other. I think it's a political dispute, clearly. It does affect the alliance in some degree. Both countries, remember, are within NATO. But Turkey also has disputes with other NATO countries, as you know, with Greece. Even with the United States, there have been some differences of opinion. As you know, the Armenian genocide resolution made it into Congress. The Armenian lobby in America, which is fairly strong, it's tried to prevent the Obama administration and even the Congress from recognizing, from not recognizing, but actually recognizing what happened in turn of the century as a genocide. America is not driven by one policy question, and I don't think France and Turkey are either. Turkey does want to have, Turkish policy is to have no problems with all of its neighbors, and presumably a major neighbor for Turkey is the European Union. So it isn't in Turkey's interest to have a major problem with France, which is one of the major countries within the European Union. I don't think this question is going to affect bilateral politics to the extent that it maybe seems as though it will at the moment. The second part of your question, if I understand it, America somehow, correct me if I'm wrong, is somehow resentful of the fact that it's no longer dominant around the world. I wouldn't put it that way. I think policy of Barack Obama, in particular this administration, and a lot of American political leaders, particularly on the Democrat side, is that America overstretched itself over the past decade or so. That America spent too much treasure and troops in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan without necessarily achieving that much. That the attention should have been focused more on the war against the terrorists rather than against specific governments. And if you look at the new Obama policy on security, there's going to be less focus on what's been called state building or nation building, foreign engagement, peacekeeping, and so forth. So I don't think America resents it. I think what America fears, as I expressed, is that by leaving some of those areas or downsizing too much the presence, diplomatic, political, and even military, that the powers that step in may not be so friendly to not just US interests, but to the interests of our allies and friends around the world. In other words, an absence of America, let's say in Iraq and the Gulf, would open up the door to greater Iranian influence. And you could duplicate that in other parts of the world. I don't think it's American resentment that somehow that they're no longer dominant. I think more it's fear that lack of an American presence may result in new insecurities which in future may necessitate a renewed American presence and potentially even more costly American presence. And that's a huge debate in the United States. I think we have come to the end of our questions. I've enjoyed it very much. I wish we had more time, but remember, it's only Bugajski hour, not Bugajski evening. But maybe next time I come, we'll have a little bit more time. I plan to conclude each show with a short commentary on a major regional or international topic. My subject today is Europe's historic challenge. European Union leaders have delivered a very stern New Year message, warning that Europe faces a difficult year amidst economic recession. German Chancellor Angela Merkel, in fact, has stated that Europe is experiencing its most severe test in decades. Growth in the Union has stalled, The debt crisis has forced governments to slash spending as the cost of borrowing for some large economies, including Italy and Spain, has escalated. It has also undermined the integrity of the Eurozone and raised the prospect of fragmentation. The pressure now is on all European governments to cut spending and meet their debt obligations. Fears are focused on a second credit crunch, triggered by the exposure of European banks to Italy's huge debt. The Italian president has openly appealed to people to make sacrifices to prevent financial collapse. Now, how will all this affect the West Balkans, including Albania? The World Bank has warned of economic hardships ahead for all Balkan countries. GDP growth in all 6 states is estimated to fall below previous calculations, and it will remain largely dependent on the ability of Eurozone leaders to resolve the debt crisis. Should the EU fiscal crisis continue, Balkan economic performance will also suffer. GDP decline is caused mainly by sharp cuts in foreign investment and trade, as well as decreasing worker remittances. Although the Balkan economies were initially spared the shock of the global financial crisis, further EU turmoil will have a much more direct impact. Trade with the EU, especially with Italy and Germany, is a key driver for exports and economic growth, accounting in some cases for up to half of all transactions. A prolonged debt crisis will disrupt economic links, not only in trade and investment, but also in the availability of bank credits. While the banking system in the Western Balkans appears resilient, most foreign banks in the region are from EU countries. Increasing stress on parent banks can precipitate a region-wide credit crunch. However, despite all these problems, I still believe integration into the European Union remains the region's best hope for long-term recovery and economic growth. A combination of strict fiscal policies and sustained reform to meet European Union standards would clearly enhance such prospects. Further union enlargement will be another divisive issue in Europe. Given the public mood in the EU, no one can be certain that the membership door will stay open after Croatia squeezes through in 2013. Europe's economic implosion could halt further EU enlargement. This would also discourage reforms in capitals aspiring to union membership and fuel economic uncertainty, social unrest, and political instability. Another danger facing Europe is the potential resurgence of populism, xenophobia, and nationalism. As a reaction to falling living standards, to rising unemployment, to tightening austerity and growing insecurity, as well as disenchantment with the governing elites. Indeed, Chancellor Merkel has warned that Eurozone failure will endanger the decades of peace that the EU was supposed to guarantee. It would discredit multinational institutions, limit common new initiatives, and increase the likelihood of both intra- and interstate conflicts, phenomena that everyone assumed had long been consigned to Europe's history. 2012 certainly promises to be a momentous year for all Europeans. Unfortunately, we have already come to the end of my first show. I have greatly enjoyed being with you all, and particularly with all my friends in Albania. Special thanks, of course, to all my colleagues at Albanian Screen. Good night, everyone. Stay healthy, be productive, and remain optimistic. See you all next month. Miru Pafshim.